Hi everyone, Pastor Vince with Clergy in Support of the Second Amendment. I don't know if you can hear it, but the heavens have opened up here and we are getting all the rain we prayed for here in southern Idaho to hopefully relieve our drought a little bit. And it's just unbelievable. As I look out here, it looks like it's the hardest rain I've ever seen in my life, with the possible exception of when I was 10 years old in Minnesota. So that's the kind of rain we got. Well, today I want to talk to you about the proposed deal in the Senate. Now, there's a lot going on in the House of Representatives. Ignore it. Ignore it. None of those bills have a prayer of passing in the Senate. But there are some things that could pass the Senate. That's what I want to talk to you about. At this point, it appears there will be some kind of a deal. In fact, Senator Toomey says he thinks he can get as many as half of the GOP senators to vote for such a deal. Now, gun control advocates are very upset because they're not going to get anywhere near what they wanted out of this. And if Toomey really is going to get half of the Republicans to vote for this, then there's not going to be much in terms of gun control in it. I mean, I'm not saying there's nothing we don't want to oppose. There is. But there's not going to be hardly anything in that bill that they wanted. I also think that the senators who are working on this are realists in this sense. They know that a Supreme Court ruling is coming that's not just going to be about carry, it's going to be about the level of scrutiny, the level of protection for the Second Amendment. Because everything they are proposing are things that probably would be okay with the Supreme Court after this ruling. I'm not saying that there are things I think are constitutional. I'm saying they are things that the Supreme Court, the current Supreme Court, will probably think is constitutional. Now, here's how I think we should oppose this bill, and it's a little different than what you're probably hearing on other channels and from other people in the 2A community. I think we should amend this bill to death. I don't think we should stand in front of it and say, no, don't pass anything, we shouldn't do anything. I think that's a loser for us. But I think we can amend the bill to death. Let's put so many provisions into this bill that will lessen the damage if it passes, or require things that we support and that gun control advocates do not. Eventually, they will drop their support. And if they don't, if it somehow passes, we're going to get a lot of things we want, and the things they wanted are going to be lessened as much as possible. This tactic is called feeding a bill a poison pill. And it's exactly how the 2013 bill, Manchin-Toomey, was stopped. There were people from the 2A community talking to the senators and saying, add this pro-gun provision. And they said, okay. Add this pro-gun provision. And they said, okay, because they needed the support. And eventually the gun control group said, we can't support that, and dropped it. That's how we killed this bill. What's in it? Well, there's four provisions. Four provisions. The first provision is background checks. And no, there will not be comprehensive background checks like the House passed that require a background check if I hand you my gun in my house. That will not pass. In fact, listening to Senator Toomey, we're probably not even going to see Manchin-Toomey from 2013 pass. That's too much. What we are probably going to see at most on the background check front is an expansion of a NICS requirement to private sales where the buyer is unknown to the seller. Now, how are they going to enforce that? The answer is, it's going to be really, really hard. If you're going to be on your honor to follow that law, and looking at how many criminals get guns from private sales, it's minuscule, because we are careful about who we sell guns to, aren't we? So I don't think that's going to be nearly as much of a burden as all these other bills that they tried to ram down our throats. But I think there's some things we should do to amend it. But first, let me talk about the rest of it, because they're talking about improvements to the background check system. Now, do I like the NICS check system? No, I don't. But if it's going to be around, I want it to be accurate. If it's going to be around, I want it to do as much as possible. Because when they fail, what do? They come back and want more laws. So let's make it as good as possible. And one of the things that they're talking about is making sure that any juvenile offenses that would be disqualifying was the person an adult are reported to the NICS system, and that they would prevent that person from buying a gun when they turn 18, at least until they're 21. My guess is probably until they're 25, because that's the way a lot of the juvenile offense laws are written for other things. I think that is a positive. I think that's a positive. If somebody commits a felony, especially a violent felony, as a juvenile, I think that person should not be able to turn 18, walk into a gun store and buy a gun passing a NICS check. That's not good for our cause. So I support that. Now, do I think these provisions are going to do any good? Not a lot. Probably not much at all, except maybe for that one about juveniles. Do I think the Supreme Court could find them constitutional? Yeah, I do. Because if you look at Heller, it talked about the fact that we could prohibit felons and the severely mentally ill from possessing firearms. If you're going to do that, you got to have an enforcement process, and the NICS check's probably the least intrusive way that we could do that. Now, how do we amend this provision? What poison pill do we feed it? What do we want out of it? Well, one thing I can think of is, if you got to pass a NICS check, then we should put a provision in there that if you have a CCW, you don't have to go through the NICS check process. In other words, if I have somebody who I've ran an ad and they come to buy my gun and they say, here is my CCW, I don't have to get a NICS check for them. That's good enough. Okay, they got to pass a NICS check to get the CCW. In most places they're being run continually, so that shouldn't be a problem. I don't think the gun control groups are going to go for that. I think they're going to oppose it, and I think it's one of the poison pills we can feed it. Now the next part is probably the worst part of the bill, and that's the red flag law provision. The red flag law provision. It looks like there will be some sort of a red or yellow flag law in the bill. Now the good part about this is there will not be a federal red flag law. That's off the table. Also off the table is requiring states to pass red flag laws. That's off the table. What is going to be in the bill is some kind of provision that provides funding for states that pass red flag laws if the red flag law meets the federal requirements. And here's where the somewhat good news is. There will likely be restrictions placed upon who can apply for an order. We know that in places like California, they started out with law enforcement and family members were the only ones that could apply for an order. And then they started expanding it to just about anybody could apply for one of these orders. In Colorado, it's my understanding you can phone in from another state and ask for an order. So what we should want here, and what I think we're going to get, is some pretty severe limitations on who can request an order. Susan Collins has talked about law enforcement only, not even family. If family wants an order, they got to call law enforcement, convince them to ask for an order. If we're going to have a red flag law, which I don't like, this would be the best one, to put as many restrictions on who can apply for it as possible. That is definitely not what the gun control groups want. Now, if we get that and as much due process as possible, and yes, I know it's an ex parte hearing, you don't get to be at the first hearing, but I'm sorry to say the courts have found that repeatedly to be constitutional in things like restraining orders. So what we need to look for is a requirement that the second hearing be held as rapidly as possible, that guns be preserved, so we don't end up with your guns being destroyed by the police. Oops, we made a mistake. And that there are severe penalties for people who abuse the system if anybody besides a police officer is allowed to request an order. Okay? Now, I think if we put those into this bill, there's a good chance that the gun control side will pull their support. unless they are so desperate, and they may be, to pass anything at this point, because they're about to lose so much face. Now, we get those provisions in, we've limited the damage. If they kill the bill, we've won. Now, there is a couple other things that have gone on, but the biggest one is there's been some talk of raising the purchase age for semi-automatic rifles to 21. That will not be in the bill, I'm convinced. It will not be in the bill because we've got 2 appellate courts that have already found it unconstitutional. And after the Supreme Court lays down the law about the standard of review, there's no way that's constitutional. The only way to do that legally would be to raise the age of adulthood to 21. That ain't going to happen. Okay? So that's the gun control half. Now we come to the things that we wanted, the things that we've advocated for as gun rights advocates. And the first one is mental health. Mental health. Now, on the mental health side, even gun control advocates who have opposed this in the past and killed bills that increased it in the past are now talking about it as if it was originally their idea. So that's how I know it's going to pass. What's key? What do we want to see in that kind of a bill so we can really have an impact on these horrible events? Well, in my opinion, the key, the absolute linchpin, is emergency mental health services in the field. Mental health evaluations in the field. I was a paramedic for many years, and one of the things, as I've said in other videos, that people don't realize is we were the ones who transported mentally ill people when they were committed on mental health holds, because they are not under arrest, they're ill, they're mentally ill, and they're supposed to be taken in by health professionals, which was us. Okay? So, what did I see? Well, I saw a lot of people who should have never been committed who were, and in my opinion, I saw people who should have been committed that weren't. Why? Because police officers did their best, but they really weren't trained enough in mental health to know who they should be sending in for evaluation. So, unless we either train police officers to do a better job of mental health evaluation, or even better, have every police department have somebody on call who the police can call to come out to a scene. And I'm talking about somebody who's trained, who's armed for their own self-protection, who comes out and they evaluate that person and say, yeah, this person is somebody who needs to go in, or this is somebody who doesn't. Just doing that is going to reduce the load on our mental health emergency rooms, which are generally overloaded. They always were when I was a medic. Now after that, we need to make sure that there are enough beds in the mental hospitals, so if we find people that are dangerously mentally ill, we can keep them there until they're either no longer dangerous or until they die. Because we need to stop dangerous mentally ill people from hurting other people. And you don't do that with a red flag law, you do that by committing them. Finally, the public needs to be educated. Look at every one of these situations, and the 2 common things that you see are lots of warning signs and the police failed to commit the person, or people failed to notify the police that this person was making threatening comments, that this person was displaying troubling signs, so they never were evaluated. So we need to educate the public as well. You need to see something, say something. Help this person. Help this person. When we don't provide the help they need, that person is a victim as well. Now finally, the last part that's going to be in this compromise bill, and again, this is all in flux, but that's hardening the schools. There's definitely going to be money for schools to be hardened against attack. This is something that gun control advocates have killed time and time again because they think it's bad for their cause. Now, they pulled all the stops out in the past, and now they're willing to give in on it. Frankly, it's an indication of just how desperate they are to pass something, anything. This will absolutely include funds to build fences, harden entrances, make sure there's a single point of entry. That's pretty non-controversial at this point, and if anything on the hardening side is going to pass, it's going to be that. But we should insist that funds be included for school resource officers at every school, and we should insist that teachers with CCWs be able to carry in their classrooms, and that some teachers be trained to assist that resource officer should there be an attack. I don't think gun control groups will ever agree to this, which could mean they pull their support, which could be exactly what we want. But if they do, we get something that we really wanted. And the gun control groups don't support this for one simple reason. The moment an armed teacher stops a school shooter, they've lost, and they know it. So, this is my approach to killing this bill. Don't stand in front of it and yell, do nothing, do nothing, do nothing, kill the bill, kill the bill, kill the bill. That makes us look horrible. Instead, put some amendments in that are good amendments that most people can support. We've seen now that there's a slim majority that supports arming teachers. So do that. Push for these provisions. Get them into the bill, and then dare our opponents to let it pass. Well, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments section. Thanks a lot. God bless. Have a wonderful week.